Have you ever woken up with a stonking hangover and said, never again? We probably all have, but almost all of us do it again. In this episode, we explore what if you did stop drinking.
Welcome to the Gen XZ Exchange. I'm Chris Perkins, Gen X parent, now 50-something empty nester.
And I'm Lily Perkins, Gen Z career explorer. We swap insights on career choices, work and life in general.
So whether you're a Gen X parent trying to figure out midlife's challenges,
or a Gen Z young professional or student figuring out adulthood, you're in the right place.
we have with us alcohol-free performance coach Steve Kirchell of Steve Kirchell Coaching. Steve has a fascinating story, which we'll get into shortly. But Lily, you're 22. You've had a few years to get to know your limits with alcohol. And I think you did Sober October last year. Have you ever thought about giving it up entirely?
The thought has crossed my mind, actually, but pretty much only after a big night out when I've maybe taken it a bit too far and woken up with anxiety, dying of the fear. But then the thought does typically pass after about a week, and I'll go back to having a little glass of wine with dinner maybe, or going back out with friends. What about you? What's your relationship with alcohol been like through the years?
Yeah, I don't think it's ever been problematic. I can't remember the last time I had a really bad hangover. I do enjoy a drink, as you know. I like a well-made cocktail. I've never thought about giving up alcohol for any length of time. Sometimes, we might take a break. I think I do drink responsibly, but we'll see if it is maybe time to reconsider. As I said, our guest for the episode is Steve Kirchell, who I've known for the best part of a year. Steve is an alcohol-free performance coach. He says he had an unhealthy relationship with alcohol since his teens, and at its worst in his late 30s, he was polishing off 2 bottles of wine and a 4-pack of beer every night. He cut back to only drinking at weekends, but was still binging, and then decided to stop altogether. He says he lost track of how many day ones he had, and it wasn't until he treated himself like a project, researching what alcohol does to the brain and the body, that he knew he could never go back. And not only is he living an alcohol-free life and is happier than ever, he now coaches others on how to do the same. Steve, welcome to the Gen XZ Exchange.
Hello, Chris. Hello, Lily. Thank you for having me on.
You're very welcome. How long is it that you've been alcohol-free now?
It's just over 2 years now.
That's amazing.
It kind of feels like forever.
Right, okay. So tell us a bit about your journey to your alcohol-free lifestyle.
Well, like you touched on, sort of my late 30s, early 40s, it was probably the worst it got. I think I had my first beer when I was 14, but that's only because I kept pestering my dad to try one. And I tried it and I hated it, as most of us do when we try our first alcoholic drink. But being sort of growing up in the 70s and 80s, it's what you did, wasn't it? You went to the pub and you had a beer. Mm-hmm. But when you're younger, you don't understand the effects of being drunk and things like that. You just think standing at the pub and chatting is what you do. I think I had my first big night out when I was 16 with friends, because back then you could get into pubs without being challenged quite so much.
Yeah.
And managed to drink 6 pints of Stella Export, which they don't drink anymore.
Wow.
And friends were commenting that I wasn't even swearing my words. Mm-hmm. But inside I was a mess. I got outside, and as soon as the fresh air hit me, I fell flat on my back.
Wow.
So that was kind of the beginning of the journey, I guess. Mm-hmm. And it just kind of continued and escalated sort of from being 16 all the way up to just before I hit 50.
Right.
Yeah.
And what was it that kind of brought about the change?
I've never been good at recovering.
Right.
Even when I was younger, hangovers were always a thing for me. But it's what you did, in your 20s and 30s, everywhere you went out, you just have a few drinks, and it's socially acceptable. And everybody that I knew I went out with drank. So why would I be any different?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it was taking a toll on my health, on my physical health, on my mental health. And it took me a while to sort of realize that it was alcohol that was causing that. You put it down to everything else, put it down to diet, or maybe I've got some sort of illness and stuff like that. But you refuse to admit that it's alcohol that's causing it. Mm-hmm. And it's for a lot of people will make alcohol the last thing that they rule out and decided to get rid of.
And so when you decided it was something you needed to stop, did you just quit, or did you seek any support? What was your approach?
I tried quitting. I tried just stopping, because I thought that's what you did. I tried dry January a few times. I tried Sober October a few times. and I literally white knuckled my whole way through it, and it was a horrendous experience.
Right.
You know, I remember the first weekend of dry January, I was staring at the fridge, knowing that there was a beer in there, and like trying not to open it. And willpower doesn't work.
Yeah.
It very, very quickly runs out. So I had many, many failed attempts at trying to quit, but all I was doing was just trying to stop. I wasn't really understanding what it was doing to me and also the reasons why I was drinking it.
Right.
Just not addressing the root causes, really.
100%, yeah.
Of why it was you were reaching for it, yeah.
Yeah.
Like what you're describing about starting drinking in like your mid-teens, that's usually the age for people in the UK anyways, that they get started. And I had a similar experience when I started drinking. And then obviously going to uni, being legally allowed to drink, I think for a lot of people that's when it starts to amp up. Because like you're saying, it's socially acceptable to go out to the pub and get on it. And I actually think it's kind of encouraged. I think if you're not drinking, it's very, very easy to feel left out. And when the FOMO starts kicking in, that's when I think people can get a bit carried away. In this kind of age as well, there's the phase where you're figuring out your limits and your ability to handle alcohol. So at what stage would you say a young person should start to become aware that is maybe getting a bit problematic? Like what kind of warning signs could people look for?
The first warning sign is obviously how you feel the next day. If you are suffering with debilitating hangovers, it's not for you.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very hard to ignore that. It's very hard to have a day of feeling bad and then not feeling so bad the next day and doing it again. Mm-hmm. But if it's a persistent thing, if every single time you drink you end up with a hangover, your body just isn't liking it.
Yeah.
If you then start to think about it quite often, you know, if you're starting to look forward to Fridays and Saturdays a little bit too much because you know that there's alcohol involved, that's another warning sign. And when the midweek drinks start to slip in, you know, when they say Thursday's the new Friday, mm-hmm. you know, or you start celebrating things on a Wednesday, you know, it's the dog's birthday. Oh, let's open a bottle and, you know, have a drink.
Yeah, it's very easy to fall into that habit of like, oh, I kind of deserve a little bit of a treat or I need to blow off some steam, stuff like that.
Yeah, definitely. Even if it's just, I've had a stressful day, you know, you can always find an excuse to drink, but you'll find when you're younger, you do it because it's what everybody does. But then you start to find, actually, it makes me feel quite relaxed. So I'm going to use it as a coping mechanism. And that can be the start of a slippery slope.
I guess the biggest thing we'd feel like we're missing out on is not having as much fun without drinking, like you've said. And like, what would my friends think if I was on a night out or at a party and I wasn't drinking? There is that element of like societal peer pressure. So I was wondering if you hear that a lot from the people that you work with as well.
I do, and it's probably the number one reason why people sit on the fence. Mm-hmm. It's FOMO, as you said earlier, because they've never been on a night out without drinking, and they don't know how to handle themselves without drinking.
Yeah,
and it happened to me as well. One occasion where I did go out and I was determined not to drink. I literally walked up to the bar and a friend said, "What do you want to drink?" And I just said, "I'll have a pint." Mm-hmm. But I was adamant I wasn't going to do that. But I literally crumbled straight away because I thought I was going to miss out on a good night. But actually, the missing out bit is only really a couple of hours of feeling that buzz, because when you're sober and you go on a night out, you can kind of see the stages of people when they drink. You know, they start off, they're loosened up, they start laughing and joking, but very quickly it becomes too far. Mm-hmm. They start telling you the same old stories. There's no personal space. They start spitting on you when they're talking to you, and it very quickly changes from being fun to actually not being very pleasant.
Yeah, I feel like when you're looking at it from an outside perspective, whenever I've done like a wee sober October or even just a few weeks of detoxing when I have gone out with friends, it's weird being on the other side of it and not being the one that's falling about the place or deciding to get up and do karaoke for the bar. And you can really watch people progress through it.
Yeah, Lily, I remember at a party you went to before you moved out, there was someone that got really, really drunk. And whoever's party it was, they had to call his dad to come and pick him up. And there was social media footage of him not being able to stand up, really, circulating around the school. Do you think social media has made your generation more cautious about kind of getting completely legless or celebrate it in some way?
I think that's a tricky one. I think social media has thrown a spanner into the works in a lot of ways because it kind of depends on the person and the situation. I think every year at school there was an incident like that. There was always someone in the year And at the time, it's all laughs. It's all a bit of a joke. And to be fair to the boy in that story, he kind of treated it a bit like a laugh as well. And he probably got some cool points for that. But I do remember similar things happening to other kids I knew. And looking back, I think it's quite clear now those were maybe early signs that something was wrong. But I think the issue with my generation with social media and stuff, people think that it's like almost like an old man thing to drink too much, and you can't really take it too far if you're not in that demographic because you're just a young person and having fun, partying with your friends. So I think if maybe we'd had more of an understanding that this can affect anyone of any age, then maybe we could have got them some more support instead of filming things and treating it like a bit of a joke. There's definitely a big misconception there that's like an old man thing, I think.
Yeah, I guess to you and Gen Z, Steve and I fall into that old man bracket, unfortunately, these days. Steve, what would you say amongst the kind of young people when it starts to go from just being out having a good time to starting to maybe escalate and get a bit problematic? Are there things that you're aware of?
Yeah, there was an interesting point that Lily just raised there, is that we didn't have social media, when we went out. There was no mobile phones, in the late 80s, early 90s. It's, you just got talked about the next day and it was very quickly forgotten. Yeah. But unfortunately now it's there forever, isn't it? Mm-hmm. But there are a large number of young people who actually don't enjoy the process of going out and drinking, but they feel that they have to because, like you were saying about, cool points. Mm-hmm. They want to be cool in front of their friends. They want to be the one who can handle their drink.
Yeah.
Even though the next day or two they're really suffering, they think that they need to do it. And young people already put themselves under an immense amount of pressure because social media is everywhere. There's cameras everywhere. There's photos with Instagram, Facebook and everything else. So you end up playing a role in the end, even though it's not what you want to do, but you feel like you have to do it. Mm-hmm. And when it comes to sort of stopping, you touched on earlier about friends not really supporting you. Your friends will. It will be your drinking buddies will be the ones that will have something to say about it because you're kind of holding a mirror up to them.
Mm. Yeah.
But it takes a lot of confidence sometimes to actually say to people, look, I'm not drinking anymore because it doesn't serve me anymore.
Yeah, sometimes it's hard. I think if you're trying to even cut down, you're saying to friends, can always have like one. And then it's almost like those types of groups egg it on and don't really want to see you walk away after having one, or will peer pressure you a little bit. I think for my friends, no one's ever gone full on sober, but most of us have taken wee breaks at least. And I think for me, like I mentioned earlier on, I like to take a wee breather maybe after one too many big nights out, maybe after I'm feeling the hangover a bit more. And with my generation, I've heard the term sober curious floating around a lot on the internet, which is just people who are considering cutting down or completely giving up drinking. And I think that curiosity about alternatives has grown massively, at least from what I've seen on social media, just because people are waking up to the fact that our drinking culture, especially in the UK, can be quite toxic with all the peer pressure and the socialising side of things. And I think when I've spoken about feeling pressure to drink in order to have fun, on the other side of that, for a lot of people, you feel like other people won't find you fun unless you're out drinking. And I resonate with what you're saying about holding up the mirror to other people, because I think sometimes they think, oh, well, if this person's able to cut out drinking and, people still find them fun, like I would never be able to do that. It's definitely like an insecurity thing. So on that note, Steve, for the people you work with, would you say it's always all or nothing? Or do you think someone can have a relationship with alcohol where they're able to keep it in moderation?
That's interesting because a lot of clients I speak to, the first thing they say to me is, I only want to be able to have a couple.
Yeah.
That's their initial goal, is I want to be able to have a couple when I go out and stop.
Yeah.
And I always say to them, if you want to get to that point, you've got to take a break from it. Mm-hmm. You can't just sort of cut down, you need to stop. So I always offer, I work with clients for 90 days. And within that 90 days, I guarantee them 30 days of sobriety. So 30 days is enough of a break where they can actually start to feel normal again. Because Don't forget, we're not supposed to be ingesting a toxin. It doesn't make us feel normal. Being normal is not having any alcohol in your system at all.
Yeah.
But we're always drinking. It takes 10 to 14 days for alcohol to leave your system. So if you drink every weekend, it's always in your system.
I didn't know that.
So you're not going to feel normal like that. So taking that 30-day break is so important, because then they can make an informed decision about do I want to go back to it and do I want to moderate?
Yeah. That's really interesting about how long it stays in your system, and I didn't know that. So that is a bit of an eye-opener. I was really interested in the idea you were saying earlier on about treating yourself like a project, and in that same kind of vein, the research you've done about what alcohol does to you, what effects it has. So I might regret this a bit. This might affect my plans for the weekend, but do you want to tell us a bit about the effects of repeated and prolonged alcohol consumption on our brains and bodies a wee bit?
Yeah, of course. So this is one of the things I do with my clients, and generally people are shocked about what they hear because everyone knows that too much alcohol is bad for you, but nobody really goes into the details of it. So if you look at a packet of cigarettes where they've got the warning that it's bad for your health and they've got pictures of, tarry lungs and hearts and things like that, there is nothing on a bottle of wine or a bottle of beer. So the first thing to say about it is that it is classed as a group 1 carcinogen, which means that it's a cancer-causing drug. So that puts it in the same bracket as radiation, tobacco, and asbestos.
Wow.
Yikes.
That's how dangerous it is. And it's linked to 7 forms of cancer. So for men, the most common is colon cancer. And for women, it's linked to breast cancer.
Okay.
And these numbers are on the rise. So it's not so much the alcohol, it's the body's way of dealing with it. So when you drink alcohol, going to get a bit sciencey here, your body can't burn or get rid of ethanol, which is essentially what alcohol is. So it through the liver, it turns it into something called acetaldehyde, which is a toxin and can pass through every single cell in the body and in the brain. So that is the carcinogen, it's the acetaldehyde. Now the body still can't process that, so it has another process where it turns it from acetaldehyde to acetate. Now acetate, the body can burn as energy. It can then start to secrete it through urine, through sweat, through the lungs. Your body works so hard to get rid of it. Any way it can get it out of your system, it will do it. But unfortunately, it's the acetaldehyde itself that causes the damage, which causes the onset of cancer in some people.
Yeah.
And it kills 3 million people every single year. But it's not spoken about. People keep that quiet.
Yeah, I do find it strange what you're saying about the cigarettes thing, and everyone's told, smoking is a really dirty habit. It's really bad for you. We have all these facts and figures about the associations with lung cancer and other diseases. But you're right, if you were to go to the shop and buy a bottle of wine and tan a bottle of wine in one sitting, it's kind of just like, oh, well, you're just kicking your feet up after a long day at work. It's whatever. There's nowhere near the same kind of stigma around it, and it is more encouraged.
Yeah, we just tend to talk about units, don't we? A bottle of beer or a glass of wine is 1 or 2 units, and there's a limit in terms of, the recommendation for sort of safe consumption. But I didn't know anything about that at a sort of chemical level in terms of what's happening and how long it takes to work its way out.
And no one ever says have 1 to 2 cigarettes a day, and that's probably all right. There's no units on that kind of thing, so it is weird. What about you, Dad? What's your take on what decades worth of drinking might have done to you or is doing to you?
Yeah, I mean, what you described, Steve, was sobering, and I haven't had any alcohol today. I think I'm pretty sober, but that was quite a wake-up call.
It's a bit of a wake-up call.
And like I said, I don't think my alcohol use has been problematic, but I'm trying to think of when there would have been a spell of at least 12 or 14 days of not consuming any, and that probably hasn't happened that often. I don't really drink during the week. Might have 1 or 2 drinks at the weekend. But yeah, every 7 days you are sort of topping up those carcinogens and all of those toxins. And it's strange how we will voluntarily kind of poison ourselves with that. I guess as you get older, it just becomes so normal that you might have a glass of wine with dinner, you might have a couple of beers if you're having a barbecue. Obviously, Christmas party season coming up, people are going to be going out for works dues or Christmas parties and espresso martinis or a glass of champagne, Christmas morning, all of that stuff. How do you get people to feel confident that they can break those kind of habits, which might have built up over years?
Yeah, and sometimes it's decades.
Yeah.
I mean, in my case, it was decades worth of drinking and being in that habit. And I'm not going to lie and say it's easy, because it's not. It's difficult. Any sort of change, any meaningful change is hard to do.
Yeah.
The only way you're going to get used to going out and not drinking is by going out and not drinking. It's by putting yourself in those situations. I do say to clients, maybe for the first couple of weeks, probably best to avoid pubs and clubs, because while your body's detoxing from the alcohol, As I said, it takes 10 to 14 days. You're held in the kick of alcohol where it's leaving your system, but because you're used to it, your body wants it because it's a highly addictive drug. So going out to a pub or a club when you're within them 2 weeks is a little bit dangerous because you're more likely to break. But after that, it's a case of going there and having a plan. Say, right, I'm going to drink alcohol-free beer, for example. So you can always quickly have a look at where you're going and just see what alcohol-free alternatives they have. It's getting better. There's a lot more pubs now catered for alcohol-free people.
Yeah, and there are some better products out there as well. I have to say, like the 0% Guinness, I find indistinguishable from regular Guinness. I would happily drink that all night. And there have been plenty of nights when, like, I've been the designated driver, so I haven't drunk anything. And I think that's kind of a recognised role you can play. But the idea in a social group of you always being the person that's not drinking, I guess people have to get used to. And as you say, you would want your friends to respect that decision. There might be some people that are egging you on, kind of goading you into having a drink because they think you have to have a good time. But I guess you've just got to then kind of work through who you want to be around, who you want to spend time with.
Definitely. And if there is somebody like that in your group, it's best to challenge them one-on-one before you go out.
Right.
Just explain, look, I'm not going to drink tonight. This is the reasons why. Can you please not just give me a hard time about it? It's better to because people tend to almost hunt in pack mentalities. So when you're in a group of people, of course they're going to all egg you on. I'll go and just have one, which is, just one drink won't hurt. The 5 most dangerous words that you can say to someone.
Yeah.
But if you speak to them aside from that, just say, look, I'm not going to drink tonight. I'd appreciate it if you didn't put me under any pressure.
Yeah.
Generally, they'll be accepting of that and they won't do it. If they still push you after that, then you need to start questioning, are they actually a friend?
Yeah.
Because you making a fool of yourself when you're drunk, they're probably taking the mickey out of you. You're just performing for them. It's just not worth it.
And I think for both generations, we have this idea of FOMO, fear of missing out, probably a big blocker to people going alcohol free. But I really like this concept that you talk about of JOMO, the joy of missing out. Tell us a bit about that.
I don't know if I invented it. If no one else has heard of it, I'll take the credit.
Cool.
But you can still go out and have a great time on a night out. It takes practice, especially when you first go alcohol free. But if you think it forward, you wake up the next morning and you feel great. You've had a good night's sleep. You're not hungover. You're not thinking, what did I say? What did I do? You've not got social media footage of you, dancing naked on a table or anything like that. So there is a joy in it that I went out, I had a good time, because you can actually talk to people as you, not as the drunken you. Because the thing with alcohol is people say it gives you confidence, when in actual fact all it does is make you stupid.
Yeah.
So it affects your prefrontal cortex, so you're not making proper decisions. So you're going to say and do stuff that you wouldn't normally do. Enjoying the evening alcohol free, it's you. It's you in your own self.
Yeah, it's very easy to feel like you're not fun without it, and it gives you, like you say, quote unquote, confidence to maybe do things that you would be otherwise afraid to do, or say things. But realistically, if it's not something you would kind of proudly do sober, and you need to have 15 tequila shots to be able to do the thing, then actually, maybe it's not the best idea in the world.
And like you were saying earlier, Lily, I can think of times when I've not been drinking, like if I've been driving.
Yeah.
And you observe everyone round about you with a few drinks in them, and watching that sober is quite an interesting experience. And I know I have thought on occasions, do I look and sound like that when I've had a few drinks? Because it can be a bit embarrassing, but your guard's down and you don't realise it when you're drinking. Yeah, it's an interesting one. So if someone was considering going alcohol-free, Steve, people tend to think alcohol will sort of loosen them up a bit, help them relax, make them feel more confident. How do you help them see how they can, compensate for that if they're not drinking?
Yeah, and again, that's the thing that people say to me quite often, is that I need a drink before I go out and talk to people. But a lot of people haven't gone out for so long without a drink, so they've almost forgotten what it's like to act like that. And there's a lot of stories that we tell ourselves about going out. So if you walk into a pub on your own, for example, you think everyone's going to turn around and stare at you and judge you, when in fact they're not. So one of the biggest things to say to people is that no one actually cares. But we all have this inner monologue where we think everyone's looking at us, everyone's judging us, when they're really not, because everybody's so busy and concerned with living their own lives, they don't really care that you're walking into a pub. They probably won't even notice that you're there.
Mm.
And talking to people without alcohol in your system, it's tricky when you go alcohol free, because you've probably got a 2 to 3 hour window of being able to do that with people who are drinking before they've gone too far the other side, and then they're repeating the same stories that they told you at the beginning of the evening and they forget.
Yeah.
So I guess one of the downsides you could say is that you probably tend to leave nights out a little bit earlier because it gets to a point where you think, why am I here?
Yeah.
I've heard this joke 15 times now. I'm a little bit bored.
Yeah.
But then you're fresher the next morning. Like you were saying, you don't have that kind of recovery phase. You have a good night's sleep, because I know I have found in recent years alcohol can be really disruptive to my sleep, but you don't have that, so you wake up fresh the next morning, ready for, whether it's, something at the weekend or, what you're doing during the week. I do remember a post of yours from a while ago when you said there was a time that you could have fun without alcohol, before whatever age you started drinking at.
Yeah.
As children, we had absolutely no problem having loads of fun without needing any alcohol. And I guess you can kind of tap into some of that, can't you?
Yeah, 100%. We when we were 8 years old, we went to a kid's birthday party. We just got excited about cake.
Yeah.
We fill up on sugar and run around the place.
Yep.
And you're right, it is getting back to that kind of state that we used to have fun without alcohol. We don't need it now, but we've been conditioned over the years that we must have alcohol to have fun. If you look at alcohol advertising, and every event you go to, weddings, birthday parties or funerals, sad events, alcohol is always prominent. It's what you do, but it doesn't have to be that way. So smoking was the same, but now smoking is sort of on the decrease rapidly. And I think alcohol will eventually follow suit, maybe not to the degree that smoking is now, or certainly not in my lifetime anyway. But you don't have to be like in a childlike state, but you can find joy without drinking, just chatting to people.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I think what you're saying about people don't pay that much attention to you as you're thinking now, like we've spoke about that on another episode, the spotlight effect, thinking that everyone's looking at you constantly when actually people don't care. And if you're one of the only alcohol-free people who's out and about and everyone else is getting pissed, they're probably too drunk to notice as well. So that's also a bit of a bonus with that one.
Yeah, and you can still get up and do karaoke. You can still dance. You can still do all the things you did. You'd probably be able to hold a better tune if you've not been drinking.
Yeah, definitely in my case.
But there's this perception that because you don't drink, you're just going to be sat in the corner, sipping your orange juice and lemonade looking miserable. It's not like that at all. In fact, you can use it to your advantage, knowing that people are not at their best. You can take advantage of that. You can be a little bit silly. No one's going to remember. And actually have a great time doing it.
And maybe be there to kind of help out some of your mates, if anyone is the worse for wear, you are still in control of the situation and can, make sure, maybe things settle down or people get things back on track if anything gets out of hand.
Yeah, definitely. And I would say my mileage has probably gone up as well since I stopped drinking, because it always seems to be me running people home at the end of the night.
Yeah, taking advantage of it.
Yeah, but then it's even that, if one of your kids are out and they're in trouble, you can drive out and help them. You can't say, I can't go because I've had a drink.
Yeah.
You're always available to go and help. And you can't say to them, I can't come because I've had a drink. That sounds bad. So, or anyone actually who needs your help, you're there.
Yeah.
I think it just makes you in general a better person.
So it is a challenge, but entirely doable. You said earlier, Steve, for you white knuckled it. It was all willpower, and that didn't work initially. What is it you do to help people see that it might be easier than they think?
The first thing is to unpick why you're doing it. In my case, I was doing it because my life at the time wasn't going particularly well, and I literally used alcohol to mask that. I didn't see it at the time, but that's why I was drinking the amounts I was drinking, because I was just trying to forget everything. There is generally a reason why people drink. And the first thing is to tap into that reason and then ask them what their why is. Why do you want to stop drinking? Because if they approach me, it's already on their radar. I don't go up to random people in the street and say, do you want to stop drinking? You imagine the abuse I'd get if I did that.
Yeah, especially in Scotland.
Yeah.
Not a good idea.
So if people have come to me and they're curious about stopping drinking, it's why do you want to stop? And it's important to keep that at the forefront of your brain, especially when you do maybe get tempted or the cravings start to strike or you're triggered by something. Is having your why at the forefront of your mind. And for a lot of people, it's their kids. It's their family. They want to be a better parent. Many of them are overweight and they want to start losing weight and getting fit again, especially people in middle age, because, as you know, it's a lot harder to keep the weight off as you get a little bit older.
Yeah.
So all stuff like that is really important. And chucking all that away for a couple of hours of drinking, it then suddenly seems silly to them. So why are they going to do it?
Yeah, to me, it brings to mind balancing an equation, all of that stuff, which is far more positive in your life. And all you've had to give up is a couple of hours on a Saturday night or whatever. It seems like almost a no-brainer to some extent. Why wouldn't someone want some of that?
Yeah.
And tell us a bit about your lifestyle now, because I see lots of your posts, like when you've been at the gym, you are in amazing shape. How is your life different now to what it would be if you'd stayed on that path of heavy drinking?
It's kind of opened my eyes more. I wouldn't have done half the stuff that I'm doing now in terms of the coaching, starting my own business. My training, everything in the gym has just got so much better because I'm not fighting a poison all the time. I'm actually training properly. I'm eating properly. I'm recovering better. And I tend to say yes to a lot more things. Whereas before I'd make an excuse that I'm too tired or I don't have time. If somebody wants to go and do something, I'm up for it. I'll go and do it. It's just made me a lot more confident. And it's almost, not quite to the extreme, but it's almost like a second childhood where I've got that almost like wonder of the world. I can walk down the street and notice things that I've not noticed for quite some time. Yeah. And even 2 years in, the benefits are still coming up. I'm still noticing different things. And my sleep is next level. If it was an Olympic sport, I'll be getting gold for England, definitely.
Cool.
I'm quite jealous. Might have to take a wee breather, actually, because I feel like an Olympic gold medal sleep sounds great right now, actually. Just one last thing, coming back to what we were saying about like young people and my generation, like obviously you mentioned if the hangovers are really hangovering and you're really feeling it all the time, that's probably a sign that is not for you. But for other young people, uni students who have had this kind of culture normalised to them for so long, is there any other signs that you think for this age group in particular we should look out for?
Yeah, I mean, alcohol is a way of escape, and a lot of people will use it as a way of escape, especially people who are at uni, have got maybe the pressures of exams coming up, or even the pressures of being out in a social situation. The first year at uni must be daunting. You're suddenly away from home and you're in a strange place with strange people. Everybody's drinking, so you think, well, I'll join in with that. You tend to fit in as opposed to being an individual.
Yeah.
So it's important to try and stay true to yourself. You don't have to do something just because everybody else is doing it. And that's something that we're told as children, but it remains true now. Just because everybody else is doing it, and maybe some people can go out and drink and be fine the next day and not have a hangover, or they may appear to be that way, but actually, are they?
Yeah.
Or are they just putting on the show?
Yeah.
So I think if you ask a lot of people to be completely honest about it, they actually don't want to do it, but they're doing it because they feel they need to. So it's about being an individual and making sure that if it doesn't serve you and you don't want to do it, that you don't do it.
Yeah, great. I feel like that answers that. Thank you.
And probably the other thing, Lily, is if someone says that they're taking a break or they want to stop, that their friends support them in that. Doesn't mean everyone has to do it, but you don't apply that peer pressure, because that clearly is something that is really tricky to deal with if you're in that situation. Yeah,
100%.
So, Steve, if people want to get in touch or learn more about the work that you do, where can they find you?
They can find me on LinkedIn, just as Steve Kirchell, and I'm on Instagram as well as Steve Kirchell Coaching. I do have an alcohol-free blueprint, which is a 5-day email course for people who have tried to give up alcohol before and have struggled. And it basically goes over the mistakes that people make when they start to go alcohol-free and how to fix them. So it's just a free 5-day email course, which they can just sign up for. I'll email them every day with hints and tips to get them through.
And we'll put those links in the show notes so people can find you easily. And what kind of support is it that you offer if someone wants help going alcohol-free?
Initially, it's just a quick chat just to see where they're at, to see how I can help them, see why they want to quit, because that's important. Making sure they'll be prepared to do the work, because like a lot of coaches, I can give them the tools, but they have to do the work. And then it's one-to-one support for 90 days, meeting once a week. And then aside from that, it's WhatsApp support outside of those times, which is not just limited to 9 to 5, because generally most people I work with haven't got a problem with drinking 9 to 5. It's
Mm-hmm.
the evenings and weekends. So I just say to them, rather than pick up a drink, pick up the phone and message me, and we can generally work through the trigger or the craving that they're going through at the time.
Terrific. It's been a fascinating conversation.
It's been eye-opening.
I think we've both learned things that we didn't know about what alcohol is doing, and a way to approach going alcohol-free. Lily, what would be the main takeaways for you? What struck you from this discussion?
I think the stuff we were talking about how alcohol, seems to give you confidence when in reality it's shutting down the front of your brain and making you a bit stupid. And when we were talking about when you're the sober one in the room, when your friends have all been drinking, and how that is a bit of a wake-up call. And I actually have been on a few quite big nights out recently. So I feel like maybe this is my sign from the universe to take a little bit of a break, because I'm kind of getting flashbacks to all my tequila shotting and karaokeing. So yeah, and also all the stuff about the effects that alcohol has on your body, because we all get told, oh, it's bad for you, but actually knowing the ins and outs of why that is, it was a bit of a wake-up call indeed. I didn't know it was quite as bad for you as it is.
Yeah, that was definitely something that had a big impact on me, this idea that sort of it's 10 to 14 days before it's actually out of your system, and that your body is probably kind of suffering withdrawal. Maybe if you haven't drunk during the week, you're a few days in, it is addictive and it wants you to kind of keep consuming. You've just got to kind of break that cycle. That was really, really interesting. And we are kind of heading into Christmas party season. So just in closing, Steve, any advice you would have for people if they want to kind of avoid temptation or don't want to get sucked into, that peer pressure, those expectations of, big celebration and having to drink if they're out?
Yeah, first thing is you can still go out and have a good time. It doesn't mean you've got to sit in and live like a hermit. The alcohol-free alternatives that are available now, you touched on Guinness Zero earlier, which is, I challenge anyone to do the Pepsi challenge with that and real Guinness. You can't taste the difference.
Yeah, it's fabulous. Yeah.
And there's so many other good alcohol-free beers out there that you can have an alcohol-free beer and make it look like you're drinking. If people feel uncomfortable because you're sitting there with a pint of water instead of a beer, then just have an alcohol-free beer. So there are loads of different alternatives out there. And the first thing is, when you get to your event or wherever you're going, you've only really got to navigate the first hour or so. Then you'll get used to it. And then you'll start to see people starting to act a bit silly. And then you'll almost be thankful that you're not joining them. So just start with a couple of alcohol-free drinks and then just see how you feel.
And I guess venues have got a lot better at having to cater to people who aren't drinking. So it's not just soft drinks that are available. There are more options, and that all sounds like really sound advice. So thank you, Steve. Thanks for coming in and sharing all of that with us. I think that will be really helpful for people, whatever stage they're at, just considering their relationship with alcohol and whether they want to make a change, and that, they can get in touch with you if they want to follow up. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much. That was really interesting. I think maybe we both needed a little kick up the bum there. So thank you very much. Thoroughly enjoyed.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me on.
I'm off to go and work in the bar, which is quite ironic.
Well, now you can persuade everyone, like, if they maybe want to sort of ease back, you've got some tips.
I'll be like, listen, I'll be plugging the episodes.
In our next episode, we'll be talking about managing across the generations. So if you're Gen X, managing Gen Zs, or Gen Z, managing some Gen Xers, or anything in between, we have a special guest with experience of all this and a very interesting story of her own, coming on to talk to us about what works and what doesn't. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Gen XZ Exchange.